Welcome to International Webinar, Lecture Series 8 on Sustainable Development. The 2012 Rio Summit led to the creation of a UN Open Working Group on Sustainable Development Goals. Established in January 2013, involved members from 70 countries and published its final draft in July 2014. Former United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon described it as the most transparent and inclusive process in UN history. SDGs provide a focus for the international community's development efforts until 2030 and are the yardstick by which progress will be measured. SDGs goals are a universal plan for all countries to end poverty, protect the environment, and ensure prosperity for all. It has a high relevance at the present scenario, in which COVID-19 pandemic has crushed world economy and fear and despair engulfed in the minds of masses. At this moment, let us look up to Almighty God for his guidance and providence for all. And his presence be with us, our efforts, and also with today's event. Let us tune to Teri Aradhana, a song sung by Dr. Anida V.K. Anand, Associate Professor, Department of Chemistry. Okay. Thank you, ma'am, for the wonderful song. Here, I would like to invite our Honorable Principal, St. John's College, Agra, and a patron of this webinar, whose immense support and motivation helps the webinar to reach new heights every week. To introduce the webinar to the delegates and also to introduce our distinguished resource person, Dr. A.K. Balian, formally. So, Dr. A.K. Balian, who climbed the zenith of his career, a visionary leader, a philanthropist. So, you are the person who introduced the concept of International Conference on Sustainable Development with Dr. Jayesh Sharma ji. To our former head of the department, Dr. Ashok Kumar sir, Dr. Hemant Kulsre sir, and Dr. R.P. Singh sir. And with your immense support, we could organize the international conference in 2019 in Clark Shiraz, Agra, and in 2018 in Clark Shiraz, Agra. 3 days, and this conference was of 3 days, and we could attract 614 participants from 14 countries. So, you not only introduced this international conferences to St. John's College, Agra, but also the concept of open library to PG chemistry students of St. John's College, Agra, way back in 2015. So, whatever seed you sowed in the land of Department of Chemistry, St. John's College, Agra, may grow into a cedar of Lebanon and may provide shelter, knowledge, and build the career of many. Now, over to Professor S.P. Singh, sir, to introduce Dr. A.K. Balian formally. Sir.
It's indeed a pleasure, a privilege, and a delight to introduce Dr. Balian, a person whom we are so fond of, and we hold him in a very, very high esteem. Someone whom we are proud that he is among our distinguished alumni, and someone who has always contributed to the well-being of this institution, have always used every opportunity to nurture and inspire young talent and enable them to rise ahead in life. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Balian. After having done his master's in chemistry from St. John's College, he did his MTech from IIT Delhi, and then later on PhD from Germany in 1982. And he has also served as a fellow of All India Management Association. He has a vast professional experience of 46 years, in which he was the Chief Executive Officer for Oil and Gas in Reliance Group, where he served as ADAG. Prior to that, he was Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer with Petronet LNG Limited. Prior to that, he served in very distinguished, very high positions with Oil and Natural Gas Commission, in which he had number of key responsibilities of leading the organization. He started his career as a research officer with Shriram Institute for Industrial Research and continually went up the ladder. Now, some of the awards which he received are: he got the Best CEO Award by Business Today in 2014. He got Inspirational Leader of the Year Award from the World HRD Congress in February 2010. He got Corporate Award for Innovative HR Practices from World HRD Congress in again 2010. Award for Innovative Practices in Learning and Development for the year 2019 by BML Munjal Corporate Awards. He got a Scope Award for CSR and Responsiveness for the year 2018, 2008 and 9. Exemplary Reader Award by Employer Branding Awards 2008. And the list of very, very distinguished, significant awards is so long that if I go on reading, it would take a lot of time to cover them. He has been national president. He was president of Delhi Management Association in 2013 and 14. He was national president of National Institute of Personnel Management 208 to 2010. He was member of executive committee of a standing conference of public enterprises uh, from 2009 to 2011, is also the president of Social Security Association of India and was president of All India Public Sector Sports Promotion Board from 2014 to 2015. Uh, it is indeed, now he lives uh, in Delhi and continues to share his vast experience and expertise with a number of organizations and institutions. And as Dr. Susan talked about, the significance of SDGs and a country like India, where poverty, hunger, sanitation, education are some of the biggest challenges, where we would be one of the worst affected countries unless we really have a proper action for climate, where peace and justice are desirable things as the society grows and inequality is quite high. We believe that it is imperative for us to understand, to capture the vision which is embodied in the SDGs, and whatever be our sphere of influence in our thinking and praxis, we must create or contribute to the creation of an environment that will be conducive to their fulfillment. So here we have a person who comes from HR sector, understands the intricacies of human behavior and mind, a person who has been into energy sector, a person who has worked on national and international level and has been to distinctives of the India as a nation, and probably we can look forward to a very enriching, very delightful, very meaningful an hour as we get words from wisdom from him and understand the context, SDGs in the context of India. So thanks a lot, Dr. Balian, for making it, for sparing some time for us. And we believe that whatever you share is going to be extremely significant for us. Thank you.
So over to Dr. A.K. Balian.
Um, Thank you very much, Professor Singh and Dr. Susan, for fine words and a very detailed introduction. I'm not sure whether I really deserve those words, but it's always a pleasure to be part of my old college, St. John's College. And it's a privilege to be really sharing some thoughts on a interesting and so relevant theme. And for that, I would like to compliment St. John's College and particularly Dr. Susan Verghese for really organizing this webinar and choosing such theme. It is so, because this touches not only the every country, perhaps every human being in the world, actually. I must also say at the beginning that sustainable development is a very vast subject, big topic actually, and I'm not sure whether I can really touch all aspects of sustainable development, but then I try to make some and share some thoughts which I think would be perhaps interesting and relevant to, and perhaps trigger some thinking in all of us to really care for our as an individual, what as an individual one can contribute, what we can support as a community, even a society, and maybe our country on this. So I'll focus on some of the issues of sustainable development. I'll also touch upon what is the Indian perspective, what all India is trying to do, and where we stand here in some of the cases. Equally important is what are the challenges that we face in really implementing these sustainable development goals. I come from an oil gas energy sector. In fact, majority of my time of my service actually went in the oil exploration and production activities. And energy, to my mind, is such a subject which not only touches each individual, but also all sectors of the life. So I'll touch upon some of the issues related to energy, which is one of the sustainable development goals when we talk about clean and affordable energy. Also, perhaps like to share some of the recent new developments and trends that are taking place in the energy sector. We'll also talk about how all these things is impacted by COVID, and that's a very serious thing and a situation that we are all finding ourselves, and perhaps some thoughts on what could be done as a way forward. So I'll start my presentation now, and maybe if sometime at the end of the presentation, if there are some questions, I'll make attempt to really answer your questions. So if you permit me, I'll start with my presentation. I have a few slides, and then perhaps that's a better way to really communicate with all of you. I'm aware that there are very learned professors, associate professors, faculty members as part of participants. So I think I'll try to make it as interesting as possible. So that's the a very brief on the presentation overview, which I talked about how the SDGs came in. What are the focus areas? SDG also covers certain areas, and there are certain focus areas in that. What are the parameters for sustainability? Some major elements or the pillars of the sustainability. The Indian perspective, some of the challenges, and I'll touch upon out of the 17 sustainable development goals, I'll be able to touch only one, that is number 1 and number 7, and then we'll talk about the COVID-19 impact and perhaps a way forward. I hope all of you are able to see my presentation.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I mean, let's see how how you define sustainable development. Well, it's a concept that appeared for the first time in 1987 in a publication by a German thought leader. And he said that he actually cautioned the world that there are negative major environmental consequences of the economic growth and the globalization that was taking place. And he tried to find a possible solution as to how the industrialization can take place along with the population growth, yet in a very good environment. As a definition, I think the most accepted definition is that sustainability is development that satisfies the needs of the present without compromising the capacity of future generations. We all know the famous saying that we have inherited the word from our seniors, but we have borrowed it from our future generations. So I think that's exactly what is actually depicting this definition. Well, I think when we talk about development growth, we talk also about business, and no business can really sustain if it doesn't make some surpluses. But then the objective of the business cannot be just the surpluses. So I think we agree that to keep the flow of returns positive, you need to be in good business. But then there is the equally important thing is that you can equally run and business and have positive returns along with sustainable approach. And sustainability must be incorporated into the entire concept of the business. The pursuit of these goals as the global drivers for growth and development has changed the philosophy of the progress. At this point in time, I like to mention that I had an opportunity to go to the United Nations General Assembly there, and when Mr. Kofi Annan was the Secretary General there, incorporated, which they called as Global Compact. And this Global Compact was a society, a voluntary society, where the corporates of the world came together with the purpose of defining certain principles that they would adhere to. And they defined this as a principles of a responsible business. So at that point in time, Mr. Kofi Annan actually enumerated 10 principles, and you can actually look at and search for the Global Compact Society in India. I'm one of the founder signatory of that from ONGC side, and we created that society. So that's also a good initiative in terms of what should be the global goals for a responsible business. Basically, in a very simple way, we can say that a sustainable development probably has two main aspects. The objective is to lead, to increase, enhance the quality of life and well-being. That's the one major issue, major objective. The other objective is that while doing this, we must use the natural resources in a very judicious way and preserve the ecosystems. I think that's, in a very simplistic way, we can perhaps define this as what is sustainable development. How do we achieve that actually? Many of these challenges we are all aware that such as climate change, water scarcity, inequality, hunger, they can only be resolved global level by promoting sustainable developments, a commitment to a social progress, environmental balance, and economic growth. So a lot of discussion have been held within the countries, jointly in the regions, and also at the apex level of United Nations. And as a part of ongoing discussion, it culminated into a kind of a agenda, what we call as 2030 agenda, which contains the Sustainable Development Goals. This is a call to action to protect the planet and guarantee the global well-being of the people actually. These common goals require the active involvement of individuals, businesses, administrations, and countries all around the world. It cannot be done by an individual, and therefore a very collective action is the basic requirement for achieving sustainable development goals. Now, if you see, these are the 17 goals of the United Nations, and if you see, I'll touch upon a little bit on the poverty. The first one, no poverty or poverty eradication, and also touch upon number 7, affordable and clean energy. But let me make it a point here that all these 17 goals are interdependent. They're not isolated. The action of one particular goal actually overlaps several other impacts, other goals also. So many of those have to be seen, studied, and an action plan has to be created jointly and not just individually. I've tried to summarize here that the 17 objectives, as I said, these are interrelated, and therefore they could be grouped into these 7 basic areas. So the first area is eradicate poverty and hunger, guaranteeing a healthy life. The second is the universalize access to the basic services. We know in our own country we have big issues with respect to the water, sanitation, and sustainable energy. Sanitation, you all know that the kind of initiative in this direction, actually addressing this particular goal, has been the Swachh Bharat, such a big initiative. I think one of the biggest initiative in the world had been this Swachh Bharat. Then you have support the generation of development opportunities through inclusive education and decent work, foster innovation and resilient infrastructure. We have these projects in our country, like the smart cities, actually. So I see that there is a alignment of several initiatives of the country which are actually trying to address these development goals. Inequality, reduce inequality in the world, and then we have, while you're working class, that even for the contract workers or regular workers or white collar workers, equal pay for the same job. So kind of removing the inequality, this thing. Then we have the care for the environment, combating climate change, and protecting the oceans and land ecosystems. We have, in this case, you're aware that we are actually a signatory to the Paris Declaration. So we are working on all those issues that impact the climate change, and therefore the industrialization, the emissions, the related energy use are areas which are directly impacting the climate change, and we'll discuss few things in the coming time. Also, if you see environment, create an environment of peace, that's very important. And we need to really see that we combat issues like we have terrorism, we have different kind of localized Naxalite movement, this movement, that movement. All these have, in fact, a great impact on the development. You'll always find that areas which are really infected by this are actually not developed. They lag behind in the development point. So these are the 7, to my mind, focus areas which are grouped where then all these 17 objectives are sort of grouped here. Also, if you see, these goals have very clear focus on 4 things. I've tried to analyze this. One is the people. And for people focus, if you see the SDG goals, number 1, number 2, which is for the no hunger, 3, good health and well-being, number 4, the quality education, and number 5, the gender equality. All these are actually focused on people. So the main issues for the people-focused SDGs are ending poverty and hunger in all their forms and dimensions, and ensuring that all human beings can fulfill their potential in dignity and equality and in a very healthy environment. So I think there's a great amount of focus on people, and I think that's very right and I appreciate that from the HR point of view, that unless the people are healthy, empowered, capable, you can't really expect any development. So I think it is the right thing to really first focus on people, make them competent, make them skilled, give them the right education, vocational training. If they are healthy, if there is no hunger, they would be very much more productive. So it will enhance the productivity. So there are many factors that come along with this, the advantages that come along with this. The second focus is on the planet where we live. I think that's very clear that these 5 goals, the goal number 6, clean water and sanitation, 12, responsible consumption and production, number 13, climate action, number 14, life below water, and 15, life on land. All these actually address the issue of the environment where we live in. And naturally, it is important that we keep our environment where we live in as clean as possible. In the responsible consumption and production, I'm remembering a book by Lester Brown, which is called Plan 2B, where he's mentioned that there are several trends in the world that they are experiencing, and that we are perhaps drawing much more from the Mother Earth than it can generate or regenerate. And he says that we have a decade to really reverse this process. So I think the focus should come on how do we really have a very judicious and responsible consumption and production. We cannot really expect a kind of a different trend here. We can't afford to have that. So I think that relevance in terms of how the food industry is growing, food consumption is going, how the food consumption actually is competing in some areas with energy, where the farmers may be getting more remuneration, but they are shifting from food crops to energy crops. These are dangerous trends and need to be really seen. But the basic line is that we cannot consume more than what the Mother Earth can really generate. That's very important. So I think the focus of these 5 from the planet perspective is protect the planet from any kind of degradation through a sustainable consumption and production. Sustaining, managing the natural resources is very important. And then taking urgent actions with respect to climate change, whether it is below the water or above on land or air. And I think it can support the needs of the present and future generation. We should be conscious of our future generation. So we had the people, we had the planet focus, and I think we have the prosperity. I think so wonderfully these SDGs have been designed, and these 5 here on the prosperity are the affordable energy, decent work, then the infrastructure here. You should have a proper infrastructure. Then you have the reduced inequalities, and of course industry, innovation, and related areas. So these all are focused on, once you have the people competent, you have the right environment, then the world can really prosper, ensuring that all human beings can enjoy prosperous and fulfilling lives, and that economic, social, and technological progress occurs in harmony with nature. I think the last focus is very important: peace. There cannot be any sustainable development without peace, and no peace without any sustainable development. I think that is so well said here. I feel, therefore, these 4 focus areas: people, planet, prosperity, and peace, perhaps are the important aspects that the SDGs will bring in, and therefore they are so important for everyone, every human being on the earth, to really take note of that and do as individual whatever he can or she can contribute. Just a thought on sustainability parameters. There are, of course, several parameters which we cannot determine, control, or have little control on them as a localized region. So I think there are certain which are to be monitored and seen at a global level, like climate change, the emissions, air pollution, ozone depletion. There are certain parameters which we can perhaps monitor, measure also, which are at the national and regional level: deforestation, water management, biodiversity imbalances, land erosion, desertification, depletion of flora and fauna. And there are, of course, few parameters that a person within his nearby society can perhaps monitor and perhaps address those issues, like loss of soil quality, weather-dependent irrigation, loss of farm income. So there are different levels, and I think people should realize that within their scope, there are a few things that they can do as individuals they can do. And the question is whether we are really responsible, where we recognize that what we can do here and add our bit for sustainable development. The framework for sustainable development normally is described as having three basic parameters, three basic pillars, so to say. The environment protection, which also has issues like integrate right technology for that, ensure ecosystem integrity, preserve biological diversity. Then the second is economic development in all aspects of the economy with a responsible policy framework, how the economic policies are framed, how the business is done responsibly, how the resource utilizations are there, whether equitable or not, whether it is touching all levels of the society, geographical or otherwise. And the third is, of course, the social development, which focuses on the individual as a society, as a good, educated, healthy society, equitable income distribution. So these are the three main pillars that were considered for the sustainable development. I feel that there should be an addition of the one more pillar to my understanding, and that is a cultural development. I think it is equally important to really focus on this to preserve, promote local art, culture, not only local, but maybe of the countries, their beliefs, their values, and integrate them in the development process. I think that would perhaps make it a more holistic model to my mind. So I have tried to add that this could be perhaps also a very important aspect of the framework of the development worldwide. Coming to the Indian perspective, what all is going on in the country, what are the policy framework, if you try to analyze, I think there are true alignment to my mind when we talk about, and the Prime Minister talked about the Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. I see this as alignment to the SDG goals, where a collective effort, inclusive development, is perhaps thought behind this Sabka Vikas, Sabka Saath. I see the union government has tried to align not only this, but several other sustainable goals with the national development agenda. And I'm sure that there are, and I'm told that there are several other key policy documents that are at different stages of finalization, which would define the government's policy, country's policy towards vision, strategy, and action agenda to meet those strategic development goals. Niti Aayog is doing a lot of work in this regard, and they are coordinating with all the relevant required ministries, governments, NGOs, different stakeholders to really work out the framework on the SDGs. Very recently, Niti Aayog has come up with a new SDG India Index. Now, this is a framework which is a national indicator of how the SDG can be evaluated, monitored, and you can give perhaps ranking on that. It's a good method. It measures the SDGs, and and all the states are being really analyzed and sort of ranked in this. And it is very interesting to know that in March 2019, Haryana became the first state in India to have its annual budget focused on attainment of SDG on a 3-year action plan. So this was a great initiative that, and a state is really focused on the SDGs, and all the budgeting, financing programs are oriented towards the SDG. I think if this happens, I'm sure there would be very accelerated progress on India, at least, moving towards on a much higher level of performance as far as SDG is concerned. Niti Aayog came up with their index. I'm not sure whether you can really read it, but you can perhaps look at the index from the Niti Aayog website. It's a ranking thing where you have the 4 ranks. If the state's score is less than 50, then they are designated as aspirants. It's a very motivative name. Aspirant, they are trying to really achieve higher performance. If the score is between 50 and 64, then they are a performer. They have done something on that. And if the score comes to 65 or up to 99, then they are front runner. And if you achieve 100%, then you are an achiever there. So this is a very motivative index which Niti come up with, and is trying to provoke all states and also give a kind of a feedback as to how the SDG performance is happening in the country. And it is a remarkable step by the Government of India and Niti Aayog. Well, in the implementation of SDGs, it's not all easy, actually. There are many challenges, and there are great big challenges there. You can really sort of list them in large list, but I put them into 4 groups only. There's a major groups. One is the finance. We know that for any project, you need to raise finance. And the challenge here is that each country or each state has to generate its own resources through domestic sources, funding from private sector, and also from the other stopping illicit financial flows and corruption, all that, and create an environment where you can generate resources. So financing is a big issue for SDG, and each country, particularly the poorer countries in the world and the developing countries, are really fighting very much to really create that corpus to implement the SDG. The second is the localization. Now, who should own and see that this is my responsibility to really implement SDG? Unless the state governments, we have a federal system, the government, central government might implement and have some goals, state may not agree with that. So these are the problems of a federal system. So we need to really have a mechanism where both the state governments and even the local governments come together and have some ownership, responsibility, and can have a similar budgeting exercise to plan, implement, and monitor the progress. This is a problem area, and I think the 3 F's: funds, functions, and functionaries, as they call it in the local governments, is a challenge. So this is the second challenge. Just to give you on the financial aspect, this is a study done by a group, Technology and Action for Rural Development. It is supported by the United Nations. It is a slightly about a year back report where you can see that how much finances are required and what is the gap for implementing not all SDGs. I think it is barring 2. So about 15 SDGs, how much it would be requiring, what is the gap? You can look at around $8,500 billion. Can you really imagine this staggering figures? This is the gap that is required, and naturally you can see that this is going to be a big challenge for any government, any state, to really generate that kind of resources in a given time frame to implement the gap and implement the SDGs and meet the gap here. This itself is a year older, and it is being used at a USD equivalent to about 63 rupees. Now, of course, it is about 74 each dollar. So you can easily enhance it by another 12% or so. So it is going to be around $10,000 billion approximately is the gap which India would require to be made up or created from different resources to be able to meet the gap to implement the SDGs. So it's a huge task. Two other challenges to my mind is one is supervision, as somebody has to monitor and evaluate the outcomes. It's again a very specialized area, and do we have the competencies to really undertake that kind of monitoring and evaluation? Also preparing kind of indicators, different areas, different states in our system have different ways of working. So supervision is one thing, and there has to be a kind of a structural arrangement to have a supervision in place. Then the last point to my mind, the challenges is the inclusiveness. Now, to my mind, this is one of the major issues where the government are not able to really give that adequate focus on including the marginalized communities, and that's the issue. How good you are as a government that you can really expand your net and include the marginalized, weaker communities, socially backward communities and financially backward communities into the entire system. This is a big challenge, and I think this remains in our country also to be addressed fully on that. So four challenges to my mind need to be addressed. Some thoughts as to how do we move ahead in terms of achieving the SDGs. To my mind, the first thing is that we need definitely very high standards of governance at all levels, whether it's a central government, union government, state governments, even local governments, to my mind, need to have a standard governance, high standard of governance. There has to be a close collaboration. In our, it's a challenge, as all of you know, in our political systems. You have different parties, running several governments. How do you bring them together on a same platform? The local government, the state government, national government. I think this is a necessity to my mind, and must be done in a structured way where it becomes independent of who governs the state. That's kind of system we must do that. Reviews, we must constantly review. We are, as a country, I think we are very poor in our documentation. I think we need to develop that habit of documenting the progress, analyzing the progress. Cross-learning, documentation, as I said, dissemination of such experiences, I think we are not good at that, and this needs to be inculcated, it needs to be strengthened. Interdepartmental, interministerial coordination, there has to be some structure. So it needs a kind of a separate structure, separate funding, and a mechanism to overview how the SDGs are performing, how is the progress. And I'm sure with the involvement of Niti Aayog, I'm sure we are really moving ahead, and we might soon see some of these areas being addressed by Niti Aayog. So I say that ensuring a greater flow of knowledge, financial, technology support from developed countries. Now, this is one area where the developed countries are very reluctant to share their new technologies, which are much better technologies in terms of emission control, utilization, energy efficiencies. They don't want to share at no cost. And to my mind, if these technologies are not available, then these SDGs cannot be implemented in the time frame, that urgency that we have in the world today. So how should be the technology transfer, know-how transfer, knowledge transfer? I think this is one area which is a hot debate today in the climate change sessions of the United Nations. And I'm sure that something would evolve out of the discussion, and maybe of help to the poorer developing countries to implement their SDGs. I'll just touch upon two SDGs. One is the first one, the eradicate poverty in all forms. Just a few thoughts on this. Now, if you see the present situation, this is about a year back data. So if you see world scenario, then 55% of the world population have no access to social protection. Now, when it comes to ending poverty by 2030, the UN and the analysis of the data shows that we are not really on that track. We will not be able to address that and eradicate the poverty. Particularly, if you see the African region, where they say 736 million people live in extreme poverty. Now, extreme poverty, the poverty itself is a big group in the world. So they have divided into poverty group and extreme poverty. And I will come to that, what it means actually. But 40 million people living in extreme poverty, of which almost about 60% people living in the sub-Sahara region of the Africa. Very, very shocking and grim situation. From there, if you see, also 90% of the deaths due to disasters, natural disasters, occur in the low and middle income countries there. Now, if you see what's happening in India, what are the targets and where we are presently. Now, they said that if you minimum daily consumption of about, and you earn and spend for your, this thing is about $1.25, then you are crossing that threshold of poverty. So if you see this graph shifting of that peak, and when we will achieve that peak of that, the people are able to reach that $1.25, $1.25, somewhere around 2030, I feel it may be very difficult to really reach that level. However, this is the target, and there are some simulation being done on that. But then what is happening is that extreme poverty, that might be perhaps be able to, India might be able to meet by maybe it looks like 2020, 2030, surely they will eradicate major part of the extreme poverty, and they may be able to reduce the poverty by 50%. The other targets that India has set itself is the equal rights to economic resources, access to basic services, and create sound policy based on pro-poor and gender-sensitive development strategies. So these are the targets, and these are the issues that are being sort of integrated in the policy framework right now for India. So I think on the poverty and hunger aspect, India is all set to really achieve certain good milestones by 2030. Coming to the SDG 7, which is ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy to all. I have some few slides thoughts to share with you. Now, if you see the target right now, 9 out of 10 people worldwide have access to electricity. Of course, in India, we have a large section of people who do not have access to electricity as of now. There are good projects being done. I'll just talk about that. 87 of these 840 million people without electricity live in rural areas only. So rural area becomes the focus for this SDG 7. On average, 2.3% less energy was needed to create value worth $1. So there's a lot of effort that are coming up, and there are very remarkable achievements by several countries in terms of efficiencies, where you produce equal amount with lesser energy use. So produce more with less. I think this is becoming successful, and we have some excellent examples in some of these developed countries. Now, we also have a situation in the world where 3 billion people lack clean cooking fuels availability. And this is one of the areas of concern for India. Now, when we come to India, I think we all should realize that India has about 17% of the world population, and it is not easy to make available clean and affordable energy, clean and that too an affordable energy for every citizen. It's a daunting task actually. It's a huge task. India is actually fourth largest, maybe now third perhaps, third largest importer of energy. It consumes almost about, to my mind, 5.5 to 6% of the resources on the world's consumption part of that. It needs all forms of energy. We are bestowed with a large coal reserves, but then larger part of the coal reserves are of not a very good quality. However, we have not been able to develop certain clean coal technologies which would have helped India in a big way in terms of energy generation. And because of that, projects are more or less stalled. It is also a pity that we are the second largest coal consumer in the world, and also perhaps the third largest coal producer. But we still import coal. And this is something which India could perhaps do better by not importing them. I do not know what are they, but there are some good quality, specific quality of coal which is imported, and we are importing as much as about 15 to 20% of the coal that gets consumed in the country, which is a huge quantity actually. But there are certain very positive things that have happened in the terms of energy to really work and move towards affordable, reliable, sustainable, modern energy. And that is perhaps the shift towards the renewable energy. So there is a transition taking place in the Indian energy scenario. One of the major initiatives has been the Solar Alliance, where a large number of countries are really participating. And India has set itself a big plan of generating 150 gigawatts of power in next maybe a decade's time through solar. And if this happens, then we will perhaps move much better in terms of energy mix, the source of the energy. We'll have a larger portion coming. This would be perhaps 50% of the present capacity of the power generation. So if 50% goes a clean energy, I think our goal towards SDG 7 would be very easily met on that. There is also a drive for a clean energy, and we know that some time back the Prime Minister himself and the government had said that India should move to a gas-based economy. Now, gas-based economy means that a cleaner fuel, an efficient fuel, a cleaner feedstock for several industries. And it has set a target to achieve 15% of the gas consumption in the contribution of the primary energy mix. Right now, it is just about 6. I feel this is a very tall target, not easily being met. I think we'll have to do several, actions. And I had made some estimate of about an investment of about 12 to 15 billion dollars in the next 5 years time to be done to create that infrastructure that is required to transition from the present state to a gas-based economy. So I think it is a tall, but I think it is a good decision in the right direction on this. We also have a good this thing about 750 million people gained access to electricity during the last 1 decade. That's a very positive thing. And there are some excellent initiatives that by the government of India in terms of like initiative of Ujjwala, where each household has been connected with a power, um, and then also this solar power, which is a poor, low carbon rich energy source. So there is a shift definitely towards the low carbon energy source generation. And we are also conscious that the India's global share of carbon dioxide emissions is 6.4%, which needs to be reduced. But when you compare with the global average, we are well placed, 1.5 tons per capita compared to 4.4 tons. But I think if some of the initiatives are taken in these directions and some in the pipeline, some more, and I'm going to share some of the things here, then I think we are all set for moving very close to achieving the SDG 7. Um, India, if you see per capita clean and affordable energy, we are very low. Our per capita consumption is very low when we compare with our neighbor China or some of the other developed countries, which are much smaller countries, but their per capita is very high. Um, so for a country like ours, with aspiration of 17% of world population to have an access to power, electricity, to gas, and all forms of energy, I think it is a major task, and it's not so easy to really be achieved. We must appreciate that. So therefore, there has to be a long-term plan where all different kinds of energies should be made available and accessible to the people. Then only we can meet this um, task. This is again a comparison of energy in terms of uh, energy. So India is somewhere here, of course, way behind. But then our energy consumption is only growing, and growing fast at 4+%, and therefore we cannot stop this to really, because it will have a larger impact on the SDG and the development growth, the GDP. But we need to really quickly transition to much cleaner sources of energy. Now, if you see, try to trace this evolution of the source. We have long back, right from our history, if you see 1700 onwards, there's been a constant change, slow but constant change. If you see, try to trace how the energy source has evolved. The main, then became the oil, 1950s, 2000 century. It is the sort of gas, natural gas, is much cleaner, efficient, and then now we are experiencing a mix of hydrogen and the natural gas. Evolution and the development of hydrogen as a potential source has actually gained a lot of momentum. And the pressure of reducing the emissions on all countries across the world actually has driven the research work on creating hydrogen as an alternative for cleaner fuel. It is much cleaner than even natural gas. It is cheaper. The technology makes it possible to store, to transport, and can be used like any other energy source available today. So I think that's a great development that is taking place, and I have some more information to share with you. So if you see the emission levels from a diesel bus, a CNG bus, a hybrid bus, then you have a diesel hybrid, then you have the fuel cell bus where you have the hydrogen and natural gas together. The reduction you see is about 73%. It's a dramatic change. So the advantages that we are seeing here through the fuel cell and hydrogen is enormous. Then how do we create, if we use biomass, then you not only remove the biomass, the emissions from that, but utilize it for that. The gain is even more than 83% on that. So I think we have seen that this is a tremendous opportunity for India to really look at that, and a lot of work is being done in this field to really create and use hydrogen as the future fuel. And we are sure that in coming years you will find some very practical developments, commercial developments taking place. As I'm privy to some of the research work being done by Energy Center, ONGC, by Indian Oil Corporation, R&D Center, in collaboration with some of the leading research institutions in the country and outside the country. And this is the first line experience and first line work being done. Hydrogen, it reduces carbon dioxide. These are the advantages, of course. Dramatic reduction in the emissions, improves the air quality, reduces the fuel, fossil fuels import. We are importing a huge amount of fossil fuels. It also cut down the costs of the renewables and can be applied to all end users. So there is no kind of restrictive use of hydrogen. So I think this is perhaps is the answer to a clean and affordable energy for the Sustainable Development Goal 7. And I think India is really working very well on this. Some more thoughts on this. You can use it in the form for mobility, that means transportation. It overcomes issues with batteries like range, anxiety, and charging time. It can be used in the blended form with CNG or pipe gas. Totally displace the coal. And it can also be used as intraday balancing of renewables, where you have the power fluctuations in the time if you're using solar energy. So it really works and fits in well in the energy mix for the country. This is some of the development that is happening, and a roadmap to a clean fuel, perhaps. This development would perhaps change the entire landscape of energy in the world. It would not only address the issues, but I think it would change the way the world would really look at energy and energy use. Right now, if you see we are in 2020, we already have fuel cell electric vehicle, more than 13,000 California, 5,000 China, 100 running in Germany. Japan has 40,000 and also have the hydrogen refueling station already working almost around 160. Spain has 500 fuel cell electric vehicle. So there are already commercial experimentation going on. And we are seeing that this will only enhance by 2025, we'll have China 50,000 fuel cell electric vehicle. Europe will have more than 700 hydrogen refueling stations. Japan will have a 2 lakh fuel cell electric vehicle and about more than 300 refueling stations. And if you see the target of the Hydrogen Council, there is a Hydrogen Council vision, the word vision, by 2050, 400 million cars, 15 to 20 million trucks, 5 million buses would be perhaps operating, which would be needing about 330 million tons of hydrogen needed. This is exactly equivalent to about similar quantity of about 330 million tons of LNG, liquefied LNG that is being produced today. So I think if really this progress, the progress follows this roadmap, we are in for a totally different energy landscape, perhaps in India as well. And I think this is a very welcome sign. I thought it's important and a good development that I wanted to share with all of you. I'll now shift on to the impact of COVID. Now, we all know that COVID has really, really impacted the world in a very, very dramatic way. It is unprecedented kind of impact. There is a fear of life, no medicine, no vaccine. More than 140 countries have suffered, 4 million people infected, over a lack of deaths. Remaining, it is reminding actually of problems that we had when the Spanish flu or Ebola, etc. were there. It has caused major disruptions in business, disruptions in global supply chain, and majority of the industrial activity has come to a halt, barring, of course, just few essential services. World economy actually is facing major recession, depressions not seen in my lifetime. Let me tell you, at this point in time, I have never seen, with all that age that I'm right now, I've never seen a kind of depression in the oil and gas sector where the oil was selling at a negative price. That means the long-term contracts within buyer and seller, the buyer was getting a negative price, some money along with the oil to lift that oil. This is something unprecedented. I've never seen this kind of thing. The depression in the pricing is remaining. Of course, some of the low prices are good for the country, but I think this is very unprecedented kind of thing, which is, to my mind, are not really sustainable. We'll have to come to a sustainable level of pricing for energy. How this business is impacted actually and how long it will done, they're all assumptions. We do not know. We are right now in the midst of the pandemic. This is not over. We are really looking at how the recovery will happen. Experts are talking about whether recovery would be a V-shape, quick recovery, or it would be a U-shaped, taking time, or it would be a W-shaped, or a distorted W-shape, or a L-shaped, which is perhaps a disaster for all economies, developing economies particularly. There are certain studies I like to share this. The focus right now on all businesses is to survive, how to create continuity in the business, how to salvage the assets from becoming a non-productive assets, NPAs. I know several majors in the oil and gas sector and associated areas are still working, although they are in losses, just to protect their assets from becoming NPAs. This is very unprecedented again. So I think that's the kind of thing. I had the chance of listening to Professor Stiglitz, who is a Nobel laureate and the chairman of the World Economic Forum, some time back on a webinar, a limited webinar organized by the Bank of Singapore. And he mentioned that this is a pivotal moment, a moment of shift in the world, a big moment in the world that happens in 100 years. And it is reshaping the world. The pandemic has hit at a time also when the structural transformation of the economy was taking place. When we review the sustainability, then is there any conflict between environment development? That's the thing that he said that please study. There looks to be a conflict between environment and development, and that therefore this is one of the offshoot of that. Very remarkable. When we see, I just put one thing from the HR perspective. I thought it's very important from the people's point of view, from the employees' point of view. All the employees, workers, migrant laborers have experienced tremendous hardship as a result of this thing. They're impacted in a huge way. There are forced shutdowns of the businesses. There are demand destructions. I know the oil company retail outlet, their demand destruction was almost 90%. Aviation industry demand destruction was about 90+%. 12 of them have really actually declared and applied for bankruptcy. There are total supply chain disruptions. You cannot continue business in this scenario. There are no wages, there are layoffs, there are pay cuts, there are no incentives. There is uncertainty in future. There is a lack of social security, safety net. They cannot really look for another source. No healthcare, no financial support for sustenance. There is no lack of emotional support from the employer or from this thing. There is no mutual trust. There is misinformation available, and there's anxiety. I think this all signifies today's impact on a normal worker or a employee in a company which is badly impacted. Particularly the small businesses, the MSMEs have really gone through this problem. Who all could survive are the big companies who had the resources, who had that also technology support to help them. But smaller companies, smaller businesses, small traders, roadside businesses, all got impacted by this. And many of them are really struggling to really either survive, many of them have closed down this thing. Government did, that's not sufficient, like direct benefit transfer of money, that's not sufficient. I think much more needs to be done to really address this issue. Continuing with this impact, I think what is the learning, what all can be done is that we must enhance the response to the healthcare to overcome the COVID-19. Many of the countries have come up with their new schemes, have brought in some new policies to really upgrade their health response, including our country as well. But the most vulnerable societies levels affected are women, the indigenous people, informal wage workers. You must note here that of the total worker class, 94% are informal workers. They are not registered. They have no access to the social security. These are mainly the migrant workers, frontline workers, persons with disabilities, also areas, people who are living in crowded and densely populated areas, persons who have no housing. They all are terribly impacted by this. They've been upending of the lives, the livelihoods. One of the estimates of the United Nations has been that, and this is only an estimate, that a loss of, just because of this, they predicted a loss of US $2 trillion to the world economy in this. This impact is worrying, as I said, that the world has entered as a major recession. I'll share some of the other thoughts in this. So what is the learning from this actually? We realize that pandemic has exposed fundamental weaknesses in our global system. It has shown how the prevalence of poverty, weak health systems, lack of education, lack of global cooperation has enhanced this crisis. It has also clearly brought about and reinforced that interdependence of our world. We are not capable of doing everything ourselves. We are interdependent. And we also have, it very clearly brought out that global challenges must be solved through common global solutions. It cannot be solved isolated individually. And the focus of SDGs to end poverty, protect planet, and enhance prosperity. I think this has come very clearly in this. It is also known that many of the countries had made good progress in the SDGs, but are now resetting their priorities. They're reallocating their resources to deal with the pandemic. The focus has become immediate focus of the pandemic, and therefore there are a lot of reallocation of funds, resources to meet that. And the priority now is actually, and rightly so, to save lives actually. One of the study that has come up with the UNESCO is that 1.25 billion students have been affected. Over 25 million people may lose their jobs as per the ILO estimates, which is tremendous actually. One study which recently came by a Japanese group has come out that there are three scenarios: the blue, red, and pink. The blue scenario says that if the recovery is quick, we are able to overcome maybe within 6 months or less than 6 months, then we can expect a growth of about just under 5.5, 5.6% in the 2021. If the recovery is 12 months and more, then we have a loss of about 6% GDP growth this year, 2020, but then we can rebound to a higher growth of about 6.25% plus in 2021. But if there is a second peak of pandemic, it goes beyond 12 months, then there is a real problem where the rebound is very little and the GDP, world GDP growth is just about 1%. So this is a study by a Japanese, and I think we can learn from this that and do everything that avoid a second peak or attack of the pandemic. McKinsey also came up with their study very recently, and they talked to a lot of respondents to assess their views. People at a senior position driving business, they talked to them, many of them in the Asia Pacific region here, and they came up with the assessment as to how they feel about the recovery would be there. So while majority of them has said that 6 to 12 months is the most likely recovery, but there are a good section of people who said that it may go beyond 12 months as well. From the Indian perspective, if you see a larger portion, more than 50% have said that recovery could be within 6 months to 12 months. So if it is 12 months, that means this financial year is gone on that. This McKinsey study also identified and brought out 5 more important challenges. And the challenges are: number 1, there is going to be a material shortage. Number 2, there would be a worker shortage. Number 3, there would still be, even if there is a recovery and rebound, there would be still a drop in demand. And 5th is that there would be issues with respect to cash flows and planning. I think we are very relevant on this. There are several studies actually, and there is yet another study which is done by the SBI EcoRap, which is very recent actually. And they have said that for India, India could experience a drop of more than 5.4% in their GDP, which is significant. That means we will have very poor, just a very nominal GDP growth. But that doesn't matter if we are able to save lives of our countrymen and we are able to overcome this crisis. I think it is worth it. We also said, this study also said that the per capita income takes longer to come back to a level, to return to a pre-crisis levels. If you see the table here, and we have tried to put the earlier crisis that the world experienced in 1975, 1982, 1991, and 2009. If you compare this, then 2020 crisis, this pandemic is much more prominent and is impacting much dramatically compared to any this thing. And also that the per capita income would take much longer to come back to the normal. If you see this curve on the right hand side, this is regarding India, and they've come out that the recovery would be something similar to we all wear sometimes this Nike shoe, the Nike logo, something similar to that. So that's going to be much longer, and they've pointed out that India may perhaps need to take all efforts, and the return to the normal pre-pandemic situation would take as long as 2024. And only around 2024 we will achieve a GDP growth of about 6 to 7%. This study also brought out a very interesting thing within the country, for very relevant for India, that the richer, better doing states have been impacted much more, like Delhi, Chandigarh, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, West Bengal, Maharashtra. They are impacted more because perhaps their urban areas where COVID-19 spread rapidly and led to the stricter, quicker, immediate lockdowns there. So the richer, better doing states are impacted much more on this. But very relevant thing, but we can see here very clearly that this COVID-19 have really impact is much greater than any other previous recessions experienced in last 40-45 years. Quickly, very learnings, I think we've gone through this. I'll skip this and that. This is a study done by Brookings very recently. Yeah, I think this is very important. I think this is a study which is by the IISD, the International Institute for the Development there. They have come out with the study that how to really respond to the pandemic crisis. They say that number one is the resilience. We need to build resilience. How do we build? I think we need to really see each country, each organization, each person need to really develop resilience. The lack of planning, preparedness to deal with the outbreak was there, and they were not really able to really respond to that. And we feel that now if we had that resilience, we could have been in a better position. We need to also develop ability for human system to anticipate, cope, and adapt. Now there are mechanisms where we use in the organization artificial intelligence and several other virtual new technology-based mechanisms to really predict and see what are the trends. We should do that, and more companies, more countries should adopt this thing. Then the second is the stimulus. Now the stimulus, several countries have provided the stimulus to their GDP, different sectors, different industry. But they say that the stimulus should be very focused. Otherwise, it would be a loss of stimulus. And why they say that they should focus on, it should support the individuals, businesses, and economies to afloat. They must pave the way to a more sustainable economy and not move towards high carbon economy, high carbon future. I think this stimulus must guarantee that. And perhaps this is the right time, perhaps from the stimulus point of view, for investment in infrastructure, clean energy, and low carbon initiatives. So any stimulus that any government is doing must focus on this. And the third point they have brought out is the inequality. This is a major issue. This is a major hurdle. Now, this crisis has, you can very clearly brought about the impact of equality because it is hitting the poor, the frontline worker, the hardest. They are unable to absorb the financial impact. There's no social security, safety net benefits, or any of the benefits of the economic stimulus. What they have said is that you must try to convert crisis to catalyst to implement the SDGs. So analyze this, how you respond to that, and from the learnings, you must develop your response to that. You should not be bogged down by the crisis. You must develop resilience. You must utilize the stimulus in a better way, and you must address the inequality and convert this crisis to a catalyst. At this point in time, I like to make a mention that in the webinar organized by the Bank of Singapore, the CEO of the Bank of Singapore said 4 points. Number one, develop resilience. That he was also very focused on developing the resilience. Number two, he said the world will become more indebted. So we should be careful of that. Third point, he said that increase the income equality. There has to be equality in income. And they said that there would be an increase in the unemployment. And we are experiencing naturally the all of them on this. Way forward, I think we are it's very unfortunate that we had this pandemic, and we are really feeling bad that even our country is so badly impacted by this. There is a fear among the people from going out to doing work, and I think it is going to take time, a longer time, which we are not aware when we'll be able to really move around and do work. The nature of work, to my mind, the way of conducting work, the workplace itself has perhaps undergone a dramatic change. And perhaps this change is going to go and stay for a longer time. I think there is a need to renew this sense of urgency to achieve the SDGs among the policymakers. They should focus on that. Addressing global changes goes beyond one country's ability and therefore underlines the need for a bigger investments and greater global cooperation. Many of the targets, particularly the SDG 12, 13, 14, 15, were scheduled to be completed by 2020. Now we realize that these several gains are eroded, but they should not deter us from deviate us from the focus and energy to accelerate and deepen our efforts during this time to recover better and build a healthier, safer, fairer, and more prosperous world. The tagline to my mind is, and I think the takeaway that I would perhaps emphasize is, convert this crisis to a catalyst to implement SDGs. And I think the recent announcement by the Prime Minister, Atmanirbhar Bharat, I think is perhaps a step towards achieving this. I'll perhaps stop at this point in time and like to thank all of you for your time. Particularly, I thanks to my sincere thanks to the St. John's College, the Vice the University, Principal Dr. Singh, Professor Singh, Dr. Susan Varghese, the main perhaps person behind organizing this webinar. I thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak as a part of your series on the webinar. And thank you very much for all the participants for taking time to be with me. And please take precautions and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Now it's a question and answer time. I would request our faculty members, co-conveners, Dr. Rajavi John, Dr. Mohammed Anis, Dr. Anida V.K. Anand, Mr. Praveen Tyagi, Mr. Ramkumar Saraswat, Dr. Padma Malika Hazra, Dr. David Mercy, and Dr. Mahima Habil Mercy to ask questions found in the chat box.
Thank you very much, sir. Very nicely presented your lecture, and no question at all.
I can see Dr. Anandanand, Dr. Rajavi John, kindly unmute your mic and ask questions. Dr. Mahima Habil, Dr. David Mercy, Dr. Padma, Dr. Rajavi John, Dr. Mohammed Anis, I can see you all. Now you unmute your mic and ask questions. There is a question from Amita Sarkar. How can?
Hello.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Very nice lecture by sir. Thank you very much, sir, for this nice lecture.
Welcome.
There is a question from Dr. Amita Sarkar. How can Atmanirbhar Bharat have contribution to sustainable development, sustainable environment? How can Atmanirbhar Bharat have contribution to sustainable environment?
Well, I think Atmanirbhar Bharat actually aims at producing our own requirement within the country and consuming within the country. Well, we know that there are problems and we cannot perhaps achieve that in a given time frame. And there are interdependencies of the economies and countries as well. But I think this would be definitely one step towards achieving the SDG if we can produce, manufacture items, commodities, which otherwise we have the capability instead of really importing those. So our import dependence, our expenditure on the foreign exchange, that is also being saved. And I think we will be able to develop more capabilities of our own people in terms of providing more jobs, useful jobs, purposeful engagement. Maybe we can help them, our workers, give them more job opportunity. Today, the unemployment ratio has gone from 8% to about 24%. So I think we can address that issue as well on this. And I think we can perhaps develop our own technologies. We cannot be remaining dependent on the other countries as well. Particularly, I see technology areas where we have a stronghold. In fact, in the technology companies, India is a leader. Then I cannot understand why on many things India has to really depend on other countries. We should be actually exporter. We should be doing what other countries are doing. So I think Atmanirbhar Bharat would be one step. It may not address all the issues, but would be definitely one step towards self-reliant, our giving more opportunities to the Indian workers, Indian businesses, giving more opportunities to workers. Maybe we can help them financially, and I think a better life for a larger section of the society.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you for your response. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Mahima, any questions?
Yes, ma'am, I have one question.
Yes.
Am
Go
I
ahead.
audible?
Yes, 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 you are.
Sir, are there any policies for post-COVID future for countries with a higher population like India so that we can achieve our SDGs by 2030?
Well, I said that now most of the organizations that I have talked to them, many of them have very quickly changed over the way they were working to overcome that their businesses remain continue. There is a minimizing impact of the COVID. But as I said that it is going to take longer time, much longer time than what we feel now. And if it's going to take longer time, then how do you continue your business processes? You need to really relook at that. And therefore, the nature of work, the work style, the place of work, all of them are undergoing a tremendous change. So many of those activities which were felt and were taken as they cannot be done from home are now being undertaken from home. Many sectors, I come from oil and gas sector, and I find that most of the oil and gas activities are in the field. But then many other activities, due to automation, due to application of technology, are now possible to be done from a centralized place. Like in Mumbai High, for example, I'll give an example of an oil and gas industry. You can control 100 wells, producing wells in the offshore 150 kilometers away from a centralized, what we call it a war room, and make changes what you want in the production rate or flows or flow or whatever. So the technology applications, the way of working, all this has undergone change. Now, this would require that many of the people, employees, need to change and adopt new skills, new competencies, new way of working. So we find that a large number of people, younger people, are more accustomed, they quickly change over that. But this way of working, in a recent study, we found that very interesting study, they're working in the same environment, in the same way. If I work, for example, along with my son in the same environment because we are working from home. We use the same software, we use the same hardware, we respond to that. I was not perhaps that quick earlier, but I can do now. This, what they're calling it, is a reset generation now. So people have to really adopt this new way of working, and companies are very quick. They are training their people online using latest technology, mobile phones, WhatsApp, and various other things to upgrade their skills. And they are becoming more productive. They are linked to, they are still engaged with the organization, and they can work from their own home. So I think one of the major things would be for most of the companies to look at, number one, how we can cut down the costs. So they are relooking at their balance sheets, their sectors where they can cut down the costs and have the liquidity. That is one thing that after COVID, all the companies are looking at. Means number two, how do you engage people, keep them engaged, productive, and they can contribute from there? What competencies are required? Train them quickly, that they are doing. Third is minimize mobility. And definitely they are taking all precaution in terms of the restructuring the work style, where people used to work in a group, in a cluster, have to work in a different style. So I think all the organizations, to my mind, are very quick to really adopting new ways and responding to COVID. I think after a year or so, when we are perhaps much more confident of doing it, we will have perhaps an opportunity to analyze whether this new way of working is more productive, quicker, and making sense. And maybe this may become the way of working in the coming time.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Dr. Anandanand, Dr. David, Dr. Okay. Then let me express vote of thanks on behalf of Organizing Committee of International Webinar. I would like to express vote of thanks to our Honorable Vice Chancellor of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University, Professor Ashok Mittal, who is the chief patron of this webinar. So thank you for your blessings and guidance at every step of our career growth. On behalf of Organizing Committee, I would like to express vote of thanks to Professor S.P. Singh sir, whose constant and continuous efforts to bring St. John's College, Agra to new height through various events. Sir, thank you for your vision and mission, which help our college as well as Department of Chemistry for its growth and development. Thank you for being with us today. On behalf of Organizing Committee, I would like to express heartfelt gratitude to Honorable Dr. A.K. Balian. Sir, you are a notable and famous alumnus. You can serve us as the face of the chemistry department, strengthening its appeal with every passing generation. Sir, your address on sustainable development was very informative and threw light into various events, and also very happy to know that you have represented India in United Nations. Sir, through your lecture, you have covered various factors of this SDGs goals. Out of 17, you have elaborately explained SDG 1 and SDG 7. So you said how you explained how to achieve the sustainable development, especially in India. The biggest initiative as undertaken was Swachh Bharat, which itself was a very successful one. So you, through the sustainable development, the focus was on the people and focus was on the planet. And the very sustainability parameter you have discussed, and also on global level, national level, and at regional level, even at village and local level, at various levels you have discussed. And you also encouraged us to include cultural development also as the 18th one, so as it would definitely improve the every nation as well as the local communities as well. And in SDGs and in Indian perspectives, you have taken the example of Haryana, the state which has implemented this SDGs program into the budget, the first in India. And Niti Aayog's various plans and programs you have addressed. And again, SDG 1 you have explained. We are very happy to know that by 2030, India may not have a face of hunger. We're very happy to know that we will be hopefully work towards to attain that goal. And also the SDG 7 you have explained that India's, with although our population, 70% of world population has, that is how huge a challenge, we also know it. But again, we are hopeful that by 2030, the gas-based economy, that is increased natural gas contribution in the primary energy mix, which was 6% earlier. Now by 2020, we may achieve by 15%. So you also explained about how to achieve the clean and affordable energy, by adopting hydrogen fuel. And also you have explained, as a chemist, we were happy to know the positives and advantages once we adopt this technology of hydrogen fuel. And again, what are the roadmaps for the clean fuel? And finally, you have explained the impact of this COVID-19 pandemic on this SDGs. And it was it was a very moment, and the world became standstill when it broke up, definitely. So hence we have to reshape the world, and we have to reshape our education system. We have to educate everything under the sky to have evolved a new structure, adapt and evolve a new system to work towards this, achieve this sustainable development strategies. So finally, you have your slogan was convert the moment of crisis to promote to implement the SDGs for Atmanirbhar Bharat. Thank you very much for being with us and to give a very elaborative and insightful address to our the delegates. We are really proud of you. We find this is a really a proud moment for each one of us, alumni of this college. So thank you once again for inviting your colleagues, inviting your friends, our other St. Johnians also to this this webinar. So we, on behalf of Department of Chemistry and the webinar committee, I express vote of thanks to them, to heartfelt gratitude to them to find time to attend this talk. So,
thank you very much, Dr. Susan. Thank you very much. I'd like to say my sincere thanks to the Vice Chancellor, to Dr. Professor Singh, the principal, and to Dr. Susan yourself. Very well organized, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak and share some of the thoughts. Thank you very much, and have a safe time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So
Thank you, sir.
On behalf of organizing committee, I would like to thank our organizing team, Dr. Rajiv John, Dr. Mohammad Anis, Dr. Anida Anand, Dr. Praveen Tyagi, Dr. Ramkumar Saraswat, Dr. Padma Hazra, Dr. David Danish Mercy, and Dr. Majma Habil for being with me to make this program a successful one. And finally, I thank the technical team to make this Zoom platform available for each one of us and made it free of technical glitch. Thank you once again. See you next day on 8th.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.